Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Identity Insights by Indicio. I am your host, Tim Spring, and today I'm joined by Indicio's Deputy CTO, Sam Curren, and he's here to discuss how to contribute to an open source project. Especially with Internet Identity Workshop coming up, we want to really shine a light on some of the open source communities that you can get involved in. Thank you, Sam, for taking the time to speak with us today. To kick us off, would you mind giving us an overview of a few of the projects that you yourself contribute to?
So I've been involved in Hyperledger for a number of years, including the Indian Aries projects. The Aries project is now under migration to the Open Wallet Foundation, the OWF. I'm also involved in the Decentralized Identity Foundation with code and specifications created there as well. So that's what I do personally or professionally. Personally, I have some involvement at the very beginning stages in the Home Assistant project, which is an open source home automation platform, and a few other various things that I've been involved with as well. So I have open source interests in both my professional life and my personal life.
All right, awesome. That's cool to hear because yeah, it's if you're passionate about something, you obviously take that into all aspects. So that's cool. So how did you find these groups to contribute to?
Via interest mostly. So I was involved in the beginning of some projects at Hyperledger, and so I was kind of wrapped up into the beginning of that, and so I guess it found me rather than I finding it. And for the other projects that I've gotten involved in, it's kind of an awareness thing. Sometimes I'll hear about it at a conference, or I'll run into something when I'm searching around for projects. Um, and becoming aware of it. In the case of something like Home Assistant, I discovered it was a thing because I was looking around and then was delighted to kind of see what's happening there. So it's mostly sort of discovering that the stuff that you're doing is in fact available and has open source principles engaged in the community, and that's a great thing. So you can go looking for open source, and that's often helpful. But often people find something that they want and then realize that it's open source as part of the process.
All right. So what is some of the value that open source brings? Why, in your own words, is it so important and should people get involved?
Um, so open source produces lasting software. Some of the internet still incredibly runs on a lot of open source software that has been projects that have been around forever. Apache is a web server, and other things that have existed since the early days of the internet still exist, and they're still doing amazing things. The categorical example, of course, is Linux as an operating system, which is maintained as open source in a variety of branches and distributions. But that's a huge example, and an amazing amount of stuff runs on it. Not just sort of internet servers, but even IoT devices or smart cameras or other sorts of things, run on a variety of those things. And so it's pretty powerful that way. There's a saying often attributed to an African proverb, but difficult to trace the source to. That says, "If you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together." Open source is going far. You can often innovate just without interaction. This is not true just with open source, but just with regular team size. If you're doing something yourself, you can often produce things very fast. But for the creation of robust software and things that work really well for a long time, open source meets those needs really, really well. And so the question was about contributing, which is why I answered that way. Often you can also use open source software without having to contribute to it. In that case, you generally get the speed boost without necessarily the downside of the additional time commitment necessary for contribution and other things like that. And so that's really cool. But even contributing is important because it helps you go far. It helps you accomplish things and move things in a good direction. So that the project, the software, and ideally your endeavors with it, your company or whatever you're part of, can lean on it for a very long time. And that's the really powerful bit, is that if you do this together and with the community, then it's amazing how well the software can serve the needs of its users, as well as how long it can be in use. And these projects span decades in some cases for how long they're actually in use and being used like that together. The other nice part about open source is that this is a common adage too, is that if you have enough eyes, then all bugs can be found. Is that if you have people using it in different ways and reading the code and looking and everything else, then it's really easy to contribute a fix. to things that happen like that. And there's a good example in the open source in my personal projects with Home Assistant. There are plugins that you can create for Home Assistant. Many of those are open source. And even when the original creator of a plugin is no longer around to maintain that code, someone has taken that, created a fork of it, which is a normal thing in open source software, and then contributed fixes or other features that have been improved. And so I can switch to using his version of the plugin in a really great way. And so the open source allows for lots of people to work on different aspects of it and contribute code directly in ways that makes it really powerful. So being involved adds greater strength and to what's happening. And I believe that all the work that I've been involved in is far better for being managed and run as an open source project as opposed to a closed source endeavor.
Yeah, absolutely. To tack onto that, being involved, and I'm not sure if this varies project to project, but right, I'm sure you get to pitch some features that are more important to you or something along those lines. Does that happen as well? Because right, when you're developing something in a certain direction, I'm sure being involved would at least give you at least a voice in how that development goes.
Absolutely, and open source is what we call a duocracy, which means that you can talk about stuff and get ideas, but ultimately it's the doing that matters the most. And so being able to jump in and promote something that I think will be valuable is a great thing to do. Of course, the community has to agree and accept the contribution that I've made, but the ability to make a create and make a compelling argument for the contribution that you have is a great part of it. And open source generally um, absolutely loves and welcomes contributions. Sometimes there's more or less process. For example, Linux is a huge big thing, and so if you are going to contribute, you have to make sure that the contributions that you make are valuable and clean and work well. They're passing all the tests. You've contributed new tests to make sure that it works, and you're creating something that will benefit the community instead of cause future issues. So I don't mean to say that it's just easy and you can just do whatever you want. If you want to be involved like that, it does take effort to make it happen. But the value of it is great, and the ability to just make it happen. No one's checking your educational credentials at the door. They're looking at the quality of the code that you're contributing and things like that. Being able to add features to support something that might be important to you that other people either hadn't thought about or don't have a use case for is also incredibly valuable. If you've got a great project that mostly serves your needs, the ability to extend it in valuable ways for your needs and likely the needs of other people as well is a great way to do it and a great way to sort of move the work forward.
All right. So we've touched on it a little bit here, but if you were to highlight just a few of the benefits of, being involved or using open source, what would be some of the key benefits that come to mind for you?
So I believe the code ends up much better. I talked about lots of eyes and the involvement in various use cases and everything else, and that's fantastic. Being able to have contributions that move important things, forward in good ways is very great, right? Everyone's kind of pitching in to make it happen. The other advantage, though, is community. I've made a lot of friends involved in open source communities, and by working together and pursuing projects and improvements together has been incredibly valuable. And so there's a lot of community that comes along with that, and that feeds back into the software itself to the point where we get together and we collaborate and we talk a lot about what happens. The Aries project that I've been involved in for a long time has regular calls, and the ability to discuss ideas and maybe learn that it's a bad idea, or maybe learn a better way that you could pursue something has been amazing, and that happens because of community. That isn't strictly part of the code contribution process. You don't have to necessarily have a conversation about it before you do it, and sometimes it's better to just do it and then have a conversation about it, just because then people can see what you're talking about. But the ability to discuss those things and then improve that can be amazing. Because you gain lots of insights from other people and lots of sort of cross-pollination from the experience of other community participants and stuff, and that's crazy good. And so I enjoy the involvement in the community. I enjoy those discussions and thoughts and ideas and concerns that people bring up are a huge contribution to the project itself and to my enjoyment of being involved in them.
Nice. If someone wanted to check it out, just getting started, what advice would you have for them in terms of, finding the right community or the right project for them?
So most if you are aware of a project that's open source, there's generally a link that's considered canonical or like here's the where to go to find information. And if you look around, you'll almost always find the instructions on how to contribute or how to get involved. Many projects have a README file, in the GitHub repository that contains that information. Here's how to get involved. Here's where to find the meetings or the recordings or whatever. And so the first thing is to try and like find where that's actually happening. Sometimes mailing lists are really valuable. Sometimes the community hangs out on Discord or some other platform. So finding out where sort of the conversations are happening is kind of a first step. And then get involved. Listen, watch, attend a meeting. You don't have to say anything. You can just attend or listen to recordings are great because you can play those at faster than real time or treat it like a podcast. That's really helpful. And then most open source projects use Git as a version control system. Many are on GitHub or other locations. So be familiar with that repository. Go look at the issues or the discussions that people are creating. Go look at pull requests that people are working on to sort of find out where the community is and what they're doing. And then the next step, and that helps you with awareness, the next step is to look for some small way that you can be involved. Sometimes the work is really daunting and it's this gigantic thing that that a feature needs or something. But you can often find small things. I've seen quite a number of contributions that just improve the documentation a little bit or correct like formatting or grammatical errors in documentation, and even that stuff is incredibly valuable. The other thing that I want to talk about is that it's often assumed that programmers are the people that are involved in open source project, and that's true. But there's a huge need for sort of non-strict programmer types to be involved. People that have good project management skills or good technical writing skills. People that are visually gifted and can help with the visual appearance of a project that is there, or the creation of a logo or anything like that. And so there's lots of ways to be involved that don't just involve writing code. Of course, code's important for open source code projects, but there's so many other ways that it does help there to have that kind of support to make it happen. So that's an important bit, is that you're needed, your voice is needed. Even if you feel like you don't fit in, you probably need it even more because of the diversity of ideas, experience, and use cases, and all of those things that you can contribute to project are incredibly valuable. Don't put up with bad behavior. Communities have policies about code of conduct and how we work with each other. In the code of conduct, there's almost always a way to pursue a resolution to some problem. So if something happens that violates the code of conduct, then there's who to talk to and how to pursue some corrective action. And please do that if bad behavior is happening. Don't tolerate bad behavior, but also try to be patient with people that are involved. Not about bad behavior necessarily, but people are busy and they have jobs, and sometimes they do stuff on their free time on the weekends and evenings. Sometimes they have a paid job that involves them, but try and be patient with folks as they're involved because it's a voluntary community. But also be aware of just being excellent to each other and be kind and patient, and then when an unfortunate thing does arise, and it's not really that common, then try and be involved in the process of making it better, and that's how the communities are improved. So the biggest thing is to kind of take a look and get started, learn a little bit more about the community, listen and learn a little bit, and then decide if and where you want to get involved with more serious contributions.
So one last question for you before you go is you'll be attending Internet Identity Workshop, or IIW, on behalf of Indicio. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the conference, what you're hoping to talk about there, or what kind of the role that these kinds of conferences play for open source software.
Yeah, so IIW is not specifically an open source conference, but it plays a really important role in a lot of open source projects. So a lot of the identity related projects that we work on with are open source. And then of course the standards that are created that make the identity systems on the internet work are also heavily talked about there. And those are not open source, those are more open standards. They're kind of a close cousin where the output is a standard or a specification rather than code necessarily. But IW is a great place. They don't actually set the agenda in advance, which means that the sessions that are held are proposed by the attendees. They're always current, they're always relevant, and they're always interesting. So attending IW or similar conferences can help you to learn a lot, and you don't have to be an expert to attend a session on something. In fact, often I'll go when I don't know very much about something just to kind of learn about what it's about or what kind of the options are. And be able to get involved in those discussions. Some are more conversation based. IAW is that way, where every session is generally ends up as a discussion, rather than sort of a strict presentation with a slide deck and like save 3 minutes at the end for questions. It's a little bit more conversational than that, and which is fantastic. The other thing to do is to get involved in all the sort of the peripheral activities. These vary conference to conference, but with IAW, the dinners on day one and day two are included in the conference price. So go and be involved in those dinners, because some of the most amazing conversations happen at the end of the day when everyone relaxes a little bit. We're still talking about all the topics and the stuff, but the ability to kind of relax and make that happen is really, really good. So don't skip out on those sorts of things, because that's where you meet a lot of people, you get to know them better, and you can have some amazing conversations that are more ad hoc. And even though the whole conference is very, very flexible, the ability to just sit and talk with someone for a minute is really powerful that way. And so I'm pretty excited about that. I'm really excited to sort of understand kind of where work is happening in the community. That shifts around a little bit with the various organizations, and so I'm looking forward to understanding sort of where things are occurring. And then what we can do in the open source projects that we support to adapt to either the changing needs or the changing opportunities that we have in front of us to continue to serve and make this stuff awesome. So that's the important part there. If you are in the identity space at all, meaning like login or verifiable credentials or identity on the internet, then IW is a fantastic conference to attend. They also post their proceedings online after they gathered all the session notes, and while they are notes taken by volunteers through the entire conference, they're not always very thorough, but it can often give you a lot of links or pointers or ideas or concepts that you want to chase down. So that's pretty fantastic. But going to conferences generally are a great place to meet people, be exposed to new ideas, and learn, and also form relationships with the community. Sometimes we get together and I've been in a meeting with someone for a year and have never seen them face to face, and we meet them at a conference that we both happen to be going to, and so it's a great chance to get together in person and continue those relationships.
Nice. Well, it looks like that is about our time for today. Really appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts on some of these things, Sam, and learn a little bit more there. If you at home are interested in learning more about verifiable credential technology, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We'll continue to bring you some more educational content. And if you have any specific questions or topics that you'd like for us to cover, go ahead and leave a comment below. We'll be sure to read and address them. Thank you all for watching.